apply for. The faculty members nominated me for it.
Okay.
And then I won the Swenson Composition Award the next year. That one you have to submit a composition. And so it just, it was a good opportunity. I met a lot of great cats. Got to play with some really, really cool people in their Sandbar series, like Leonel Oweke came through one time. Amazing. Ellis Marsalis did, you just meet people. It afforded me a lot of opportunities that I don't know if I would have necessarily had up here,
For sure. So your time in New Orleans, you spent 4 years?
6 years almost.
6 years.
Yeah, 6 years. Yeah, man. I'd only planned to stay 3 to 5, I told myself.
Right. Well, it's real comfortable down there.
Whew. Come on, man. Come on.
So what are the two top, what are the two lessons you learned from living in New Orleans? Life lessons.
I think one thing that New Orleans is really, really keen on is just be yourself. A lot of people think that New Orleans is about trying to sound like you're from some kind of like era or like trying to fit into this mold, where when you realize that the actual motto of the city is do what you wanna. You know what I'm saying? That's the reason why that's the Mardi Gras anthem. When you hear that doom, boom, 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 do what you wanna. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You started up, you did. But it's really about be yourself. Nobody judges you. It's okay.
Yeah.
If you that's why they have you go down Rampart Street, people are free. People are just free, man. They even have this thing called the red dress run. Yeah, man. Everybody, including men, are wearing red dresses and nobody cares. It's like, we free. Yeah. It's all good. Nobody's judging you. It's a beautiful city. I think that's one. And the second one was, just really, the ideal of community is so strong down there. Like people really, really know. I mean, you have to, because it's such a small city. It's a little big city, I like to call it.
Right.
It's one of the major cities in the United States, but geographically it's very, very tiny. Mm-hmm. So you see people on a regular basis and you know them. So it fosters this sense of community that's very, very beautiful. And in the toughest times, New Orleanians will come together and help one another out. And it's it is one of those things that when the city needs it, people come through, bro, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, I can second that.
Yeah, man.
It's like we're New Orleans. I'm not from New Orleans either, but I lived there for a long time.
Yeah, you was there, man. I saw you on Jazz Fest. I was in town. I came and you was playing with Ellis Marsalis. You had a Jerry curl back then. I never forget this.
I had no damn Jerry.
He had a dripping frosting. Let me stop.
But the sense of community is deep. It
is, man.
It's deep. It's more like a family in New Orleans. It's only it's not that many of us, so we gotta.
Man, you gonna need somebody one day. You did. That's the vibe. I'm gonna need you for a gig one day. I'm gonna need you to sub for me. I'm gonna need something.
I'm gonna need you to move this couch.
Yeah, so let's be cool. Let's just be cool. And I think the energy is a little different because everybody's working down there.
That's true.
Like the saddest of the saddest cats got like weekly gigs.
Yeah,
that they've been holding down. It's a loyalty thing down there. You learn that down there. Is that loyalty? Like there'll be situations where a cat will call the person they run with, so to speak, over the person they know is more qualified for the gig. Now there's plus or minuses to that, of course.
Of course,
you should call who you need for the music, but at the same time, there's something to be said about being like, this is my boy. I'm gonna look out for my boy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
First.
Yeah, that's more important. It's very, very interesting to see how that plays out. Yeah.
So, man, what challenges have you faced and overcome that you didn't anticipate due to living in New Orleans?
Well, I feel like the first thing that I realized was that the work up here is there's definitely work up here, but it's not as frequent as it is down there. It can be, but even still, you can work 7 days a week playing 3 to 4 gigs a day if you really want to work that way in New Orleans. Right. It can be done.
Right.
And you can make good money doing it. You'll work yourself. And you'll be playing like all different types of music and everything, Here I feel like the gigs happen a little bit more sporadically, and it's usually everybody's niche. It's like, this is what I do. I stick with jazz. I hang with the modern jazz cats, or I hang with the traditional jazz cats, or I hang with the bebop cats, or I do this. I mean, there's people who, go between the different schools, but there's not as much cross-pollination in terms of you don't see cats who are coming from the funk realm going and playing jazz gigs, and vice versa, that I know of.
Right. Well,
at this time,
I'm not saying in New York City.
Yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
It happens.
But somebody told me before I moved here, what's his name? Brad Bourgeois, saxophonist, or Scott Bourgeois, I think his name is.
I don't know. Yeah.
He was telling me, he's like, New York is like pick your poison, And it's getting back to that thing we were talking about with community. There are communities up here in New York, but they're little cliques that abound separately from one another, and they're all like, this is the crew I run with. I don't run with this crew. Whereas in New Orleans, it's like, we all here in one big pot. We gotta get along because, literally, you're gonna be on the bandstand with this person someday.
Exactly,
it's gonna happen.
So, how did you prepare yourself psychologically and musically for the move to New York from New Orleans?
Well, when I moved to New Orleans, I moved to New Orleans with the intentions of one day moving to New York. So in my mind, that was already the goal. Like I said, I gave myself 3 to 5 years. It ended up being 6. But I was like, I want to go to New York. That's just, as a jazz musician, if you're really, really trying to do it, you're going to land in New York at some point in time. Or at least you're going to go through there a whole bunch where people think you live there. Mm-hmm. But I knew I always wanted to come. So psychologically, I kind of just had to prep myself for how difficult it was going to be. And luckily, my wife helped me out with a whole bunch of stuff. She was instrumental in getting the whole moving process. Because I was on the road at the time.
Right.
So she did a lot of the packing. She saved me that stress. And, there was just musically, it was just it was the same thing that you got to do anyway. You got to practice. I started to psych myself out. It's a funny thing. I got here, my good friend, Jameson Ross, great drummer. He said, I was talking to him one day. He's like, bro, you sound like you got the weight of the world on your shoulders. Because, you'll psych yourself out when you get up here. You'll be like, oh, man. I guess psychologically, I had to keep telling myself that I have something to offer that's just as valid as somebody else. And I always said this before I even moved to New Orleans is, I'm not trying to be better than anybody except myself on a daily basis. I never want to compete with anybody. I don't want to get into this cat's better than me. This cat's worse. That cat's the best person they are. And I'm the best person I can be, and nobody can be a better person than you are.
There it is.
So no one can be a better you than you is what I mean to say. So it was just coming up here and just being inspired and seeing so many great bass players. To name some offhand, you have cats like Yasushi Nakamura, who's just what? You have Alex Claffey, you have Russell Hall, Dan Chemalinsky. The list goes on and on. Dude. You can go see some bad shit every night in New York City.
Every night.
And it's a very, very great place to be for that aspect, to be inspired by your peers who are trying to do something to push the music forward,
Yeah. Have you decided to stay in New York City for the rest of your life?
It's funny. Me and my wife talked about it. We're going to not really put a time frame on it.
Yeah. Okay.
As I did with New Orleans. And partially because I had a conversation one time at Snug Harbor down on Frenchman Street in New Orleans with Matt Penman. He was playing with Aaron Goldberg and Hutch, and it was a Tuesday night. Nobody was there.
What?
Yeah, bro. The musicians were there, but it was empty. It was deep. It was so deep. And that's the thing about New Orleans. You can have some bad cats and nobody be like I don't care about them people. I want to go see Kermit Ruffins. You know what I'm saying?
That's terrible.
But I talked with Matt Penman afterwards, and I was asking him about New York because, obviously I've been planning on making that move.
Right.
And he was saying to me, he said, he's like, man, it took 10 years for him to even get the gigs that everybody knows him for now. He's like, 10 years of being in New York. I was like, what? And I'm thinking about his career now. Matt plays with everyone. He plays with SF Jazz. He's on, Aaron Parks records. He's on, he's everywhere.
He's the man.
He's the man. He said it took him 10 years.
Wow.
10 years. So to think, and I've talked with a lot of people, the minimum is at least 5. You can't come to New York and just, be like, I'm going to stay for a year or 2 and then bounce. Unless you got it like that. If you got it like that, do what you got to do. I ain't mad at nobody. I just know for me, I'm not going to try and, I'm not going to try and rush it. I want it to be very, very organic, and I want to get the most out of it. So I'm going to let it run its course, so to speak.
Yeah, you're right. So, man, what would you tell a young bass player in your shoes, like somebody or one of your friends who want to come up from New Orleans to New York City? Like, what 3 things would you tell them to do to prepare themselves to make that leap?
Well, one thing that helped me more than anything before I even moved to New York was my mentality was such that when I was in New Orleans, I said to myself, I need to be amassing contacts for New York right now. And some things that helped with that were Betty Carter's Jazz Ahead.
Okay.
Ravinia Music Festival. I was a part of those 2 different programs. I did Betty Carter's twice. And so most of the people who were in those programs were living in New York. So that was like more New York friends.
Yeah.
Then a good friend of mine, great pianist by the name of Chris Pattershaw, he was going to William Patterson, and then he moved to New York after that. And whenever I would come up here and I would hang with him, he would take me around the scene, introduce me to people. It's really about those introductions. When you know somebody who's like, oh man, this is a great bass player who just moved to the city, Barry Stephenson, even if it's a lie. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if it's a complete lie. Okay. The power of the introduction will open up many doors for you. And then once you sit in and they see the vibe, they're like, okay, give me your phone number.
Right.
And so connections, man, like making connections and actually utilizing them. Like before I moved to New York, like a couple of months, let's back it up. Every time I would come to New York, the people I was connected with, I would contact them like 2 to 3 months in advance and just be like, hey, I wouldn't even ask them for work. I'd just be like, hey, man, I'm going to be in the city. Let's hang out and play when you get a moment.
You're reminding them that you're around.
You're around. And then inevitably, somebody's going to be like, hey, man, I got this gig. You want to come do it? And then you meet more musicians.
So how do you keep yourself grounded when you achieve success?
It's funny you say that because, I just recently did a couple of weeks on the Late Show at Stephen Colbert, playing with John Batiste and Stay Human.
You famous.
And that's what everyone says. And they're like, oh, you famous, you blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nah, man, it was a gig. You know what I'm saying? It was another opportunity to do what I love, and I'm very, very fortunate for it. But at the same time, you have to realize that you got to keep going. You can't. Herlin Riley taught me this. He said, you're only as good as your last gig. He's like, people know me for playing with Wynton and Ahmad Jamal. He's like, but if they saw me last night and I sounded sad, they're not going to remember all that other stuff. They're just going to remember I sounded sad on the gig.
Yeah.
So I think to keep in mind that there's always, if you have goals and you know that there's another level that you want to be at, just not being satisfied with just where you are now. And I know I could take that and be like, yeah, man, I moved to New York and I started playing on TV and like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And be like, yeah, I made it. But the harsh reality of it is I have so far to go, Mm-hmm. So to just take that as like the only thing, it's not really a barometer for what I'm really, how successful I can be.
Yeah.
It's just a really good place to be at the moment.
Damn, there it is.
You know what I'm saying? It's a great place to be at the moment,
Hey, look. So how do you keep yourself moving forward through times of failure?
You just realize that, everyone fails. Failure is a natural part of life, and in order to succeed, you have to fail a couple of times. It's like when you learn how to ride a bike. You don't just jump on a bike and all of a sudden you're just riding that mug. You fall. You skin your knee. You take the training wheels off. You cry. You hurt. You have a lot of different attempts. But eventually it clicks, and you're like, God damn, I can ride this bike now. And then you start trying to get bold and be like, look, no hands, and you fall doing that, And then you get back up. So I think failure is a very, very necessary part of life. It teaches us a lot. Failure teaches us what we did wrong, what we can do right, and it also teaches us like the power of the human spirit. Because like some people, they fail and they're just like, I'm giving up, I don't care. And other people, especially in our career, when you fail, right, it pushes you. I remember those days of being, an undergrad at FSU. I would be in the practice room, and I was real sad back then. I'm still, I can play a little bit now, but back then it was real rough. And I remember one day being in the practice room at like 3 a.m. and like I took a hard look in the mirror and I was like, is this, I put